weeks ago, you guys might remember that we picked up a new engine for the Fox Body. After stopping my search for one of these motors and accepting the fact that I was just going to take this 302 and rebuild the bottom end and run that for another season, I stumbled upon this, a 94 351 roller block for an absolute bargain. I got a whole long block for 150 bucks, which, if you guys know and have been searching for one of these motors used, is a very good deal. People usually want about 500 bucks for even just the block alone, no internals or anything else. Now, I had some ideas, and I asked you guys what you guys think we should do with this motor, whether or not we should do a stroker motor or go budget and just do a stock bottom end rebuild and maybe throw a little boost at it to see what kind of power we can make. And to my surprise, people actually voted more so for the stock bottom end rebuild with a turbo, which is what I was thinking originally. And to be honest, I think it's more fun because I would love to see what one of these stock bottom ends could do with a little bit of boost at it. But today's video, we're going to tear into the bottom end of this, check the overall health and wellness of the block and the lower end parts, kind of get an idea of what kind of life this motor had before. I was told that it did burn a lot of oil. I believe it's probably something to do with the heads, maybe a bad valve stem seal. But either way, we're going to see if this block is even a good candidate for a stock bottom end rebuild. Started undressing the motor, took the intake and the heads off already because I couldn't wait and I wanted to see what the value looked like and also make sure that it was a 351. So we did that when we picked up the motor. Took off the heads when I got home. Now, at first glance, the cylinder walls are not really too bad. There are no major ridges at the very top where the rings stop and seal. There are no major cylinder wall scores that I can see. Now, the only thing that is really concerning for me is I think at one point either this motor had a bad head gasket or something, because you could tell that there's a little bit of evidence that there might have been a little bit of water in here when the motor had sat for a little while. My main concern for this is whether or not the pits in the cylinder walls are too deep to be able to be cleaned up with a regular ball hone or a DIY honing job. That's a major factor that's basically going to determine the direction that we go with this motor. So we're going to get this oil pan torn off, cam and bottom rotating assembly torn out, and inspect everything. Basically get an overall assessment of what the health is of this block and whether or not we can use what we have. I have been soaking these water pump bolts ahead of time because these are very well known to snap off into the block, and then we're going to have a whole another set of issues we'll have to deal with. Looking at the lifters quick, what seems to be some normal wear. There's nothing that like stands out, like maybe a lifter collapsed or a cam lobe was smoked, so that's a good sign. A little bit of sludge in there, but I don't see any metal shavings or chunks. All right, we got the whole rotating assembly all torn down and laid out on the bench here. Thankfully, nothing I took apart screamed catastrophic failure of any sorts. So I believe that this engine did, in fact, run before it was pulled out. What I did find was basically just normal wear and tear for a high mileage motor. If I had to guess, judging by the copper in the rod bearings and the crankshaft main bearings, the motor definitely has seen a lot of miles. All it is just normal wear, and none of the bearings on the rods or the crankshaft have any major issues such as bad scoring or anything that wouldn't let me polish these parts up and slap back together with some new gaskets, rings, and bearings. Again, the only thing that's really concerning is the evidence where there was possibly some water that had gotten in and sat in the motor. So overall, I'm pretty happy with this disassembly. With a cheap used motor, you never know what you're going to get into. But my initial thoughts are that we're going to be able to save some of these stock parts and just refreshen everything up and slap it in the car and enjoy it. Went out and picked up a telescoping gauge set and a larger digital caliper so we can measure the diameter of the board, make sure that before I start honing these out, I'm not already starting in the negative and starting out with a bore that's way too big. All 8 cylinders, thankfully, were within 1/1000th of each other, and none of them were over 4 inches. So that's a good starting point. We'll have a little bit of room and material to work with to get rid of some of these pits with the honing tool. What we're going to try is this 240 grit ball honing tool. We're going to use a mixture between kerosene and a little dash of transmission fluid as a honing oil. If I can't clean the cylinder walls up with a simple honing job and more material needs to be taken out by a machine shop, then obviously doing a stock bottom end refresh and rebuild is not going to be an option. But I'm pretty optimistic. I think we can clean these cylinder walls up and get a nice crosshatch. This is also all completely new for me. I've never done this before. So I've done some research and I have an idea, but there is a possibility that I royally screw this whole thing up. First cylinder that I did came out pretty good, I think. Nice crosshatch pattern, and the cylinder walls are nice and cleaned up. Now this second one that I tried, I did a quick couple passes, and like I said, I'm not really sure about these pittings, how deep exactly they're gonna go. So we're gonna do a couple more passes, see if that'll clean up. For some of the cylinders, the ball hone wasn't quite doing it. To go a little more abrasive, take a little bit more material out. Still a little bit of staining that we're gonna have to take care of. But some of the cylinders, like cylinder number 6, I believe, was a little bit more than the dingle ball can handle. So, I picked up something that was a little more abrasive, not too crazy, but a 3-stone honing tool. Periodically, I'm honing it, cleaning it, and checking it with dial gauge just to make sure that we're going too crazy with removal of material. I know that the right thing to do, technically, would be to bring this to a machine shop and have them overbore it. At this point, I kind of want to just see if we can really do this on the cheap. It's going to be kind of an experiment. I think we can do it. The pits really aren't that bad, but they're bad enough that a dingle ball hone won't clean it up. Right now, I'm not currently worried about the cross hatching. We're just trying to get these pits out, and then afterwards we're gonna go through and we'll hit it and get the right cross hatching. Decided I want to do this on a budget, so we're gonna try to stick with that. Well, I've got good news and I got bad news. Bad news is I wasn't able to save the stock bore, be able to do a stock bottom end rebuild. I was able to get a couple of the cylinders very nice with some nice cross hatching. Cylinders 3 and 4 looked very nice. Cylinder 1 looks nice. After some time, 7 and 8 were looking nice. Number 6 was able to be 99% cleaned up. However, there was an outlier that isn't looking very good. Cylinder number 2. There's some serious rust pitting that I'm unable to get out. All the other cylinders would have also been questionable. After taking a couple thousandths of each cylinder, I was going to be over the limit for piston to wall clearance tolerance. Factory calls for, I believe, 2 thou and a maximum of 5 thousandths. And some of the cylinders were between 7.5 and 9, which, to be honest, I kind of was going to run it anyways, just to kind of experiment and see what would happen. I read a lot online where excessive piston wall clearance, you get piston slap, and that can crack skirts, crack rings, you lose compression, burn a lot of oil, and the whole reason why I'm taking the 302 out is because it's using a lot of oil. And I don't want to spend a ton of time in a motor for the sake of budget if I'm going to have to take the motor right back out. And then it wouldn't be so budget friendly because I'd be spending a ton of money on gaskets, fluids, all for nothing. But I was going to experiment and put it together anyways with those wild tolerances. More so, it'd be kind of entertaining. However, with cylinder number 2, so far I've taken out about 5 thousandths. The cylinder bore already at about 6 thousandths over that standard 4-inch bore. And just by feeling these pits, definitely gonna have to take at least another 2 or 3 thou out of material just to get this cylinder cleaned up. Then I'd be in the range about probably 7 to 8 thousandths over the standard bore. And to put an engine together, knowing that that cylinder is that compromised would just be stupid. With all that being said, that means we're going to have to take this engine block to a machine shop, which can be the good news. Now, the good news is when you take a machine shop, they'll magnaflux it, they'll check for cracks, they'll clean the whole block. We can have them install cam bearings, freeze plugs, all the other oil gallery plugs, and get these cylinders 100% true. We'll have that peace of mind. Now you may ask yourself, was this whole process a waste of time? I wouldn't say so. I learned a lot by simply just trying to do this myself. I had to do a lot of research just because I wanted to make sure I wasn't doing this super out of whack and screwing myself with ignorance. I learned a lot about factory clearances, piston to wall clearance, and even learned how to use new tools. So this whole process, definitely don't regret it. I recommend everybody try this because you can always learn something new. I really wanted to see how much power the factory bottom end parts could handle. Now it is time to go back to the drawing board, weigh out my options to see what would be the best direction to go, while still keeping a lower cost build in mind. But that is all to be determined. Let me know down below what you guys think we should do. What direction would you take this block, knowing what you know now? But as always, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.